Welcome to Savage Minds. I'm your host, Julian Vigo. Today's guest is Gilbert Achcar. Gilbert Achcar was born in Senegal in 1959, grew up in Lebanon, lived in Paris and Berlin, and has been based in London since 2007. He is Emeritus Professor at SOAS, University of London. His many books include The Clash of Barbarisms, Perilous Power, the Middle East and U.S. Foreign Policy with Noam Chomsky, The Arabs and the Holocaust, The People Want, a radical exploration of the Arab uprising, The New Cold War, the United States, Russia, and China, from Kosovo to Ukraine, and The Gaza Catastrophe, the Genocide in World Historical Perspective. I welcome Gilbert Achcar to Savage Minds. I am very thrilled to speak with you, and I really loved your book. I'm very happy to discuss your work.
Thank you very much.
As you know, we are living in this very disturbing present where my children ask me, they see the news because I'm constantly in the news, and they ask me why one side is being called terrorists and the other side are not. Even children see the imbalance.
Yes.
Through media misrepresentation.
Yeah.
And I really loved how you began your book, The Gaza Catastrophe, the Genocide in World Historical Perspective, because you asked two questions that might seem to people who are very knowledgeable on the Middle East or the situation with Palestine and Israel to be obvious. But in a way, I think these two questions get at something that we need to examine once more. And I'll just read for our listeners the questions. In what sense is Israel's genocidal onslaught on the Gaza Strip a consequence of the Hamas-led attack on 7 October 2023? And how is the Hamas-led attack related to the anti-Semitic pogroms of the Pale of Settlement in the Russian Empire of the 19th and early 20th centuries, and/or to the Nazi genocide of the Jews in 1941 through 1945? Right after that second question, you go on, and I want to read this because I think this is also very important. The Darwinian mimicry has indeed set in to the point that Israel has become a state ruled by a coalition of neo-fascists, Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud, and neo-Nazis, the likes of ultra-right ministers Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, among others, that has perpetrated the first genocide, including the intentionality entailed in the concept executed by a technologically advanced state since the final defeat in 1945 of the far-right Axis powers coalition of World War II. What is more, it is history's first genocide to be broadcast live on television. End quote. I keep hearing from people, even my students here, that they are disturbed because it's every second on their smartphones. You cannot get away from this genocide. And again, I prefaced your quotes here with saying that these are questions that we see thrown at us sometimes even by the likes of Piers Morgan, but in an inverse way. Do you support Hamas? Will you denounce the atrocities on 7 October, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why did you choose these two questions specifically to highlight in an era where legacy media is pretending that 7 October was the beginning of the conflict on the one hand, and on the other, where you have people like Piers Morgan using this as some kind of litmus test as to anti-Semitism, never, of course, inverting the question to 1948?
Right. Well, I mean, from the start, these were the questions that were at the center of the debate, even though since then, of course, almost 2 years after the beginning of this genocidal war that is going on in Gaza, things may have changed in the understanding of people. But at the beginning, the whole focus was, of course, on 7 October, on the 7 October attack. And therefore, the war that started immediately in the wake of this attack was portrayed in the Western media and by Western governments as a legitimate response by Israel, an exercise by Israel of its right to defend itself, right? And therefore, I think it was important to stress from the beginning that the violence and the scope of the Israeli retaliation to 7 October went far beyond anything that could really be construed as a response or to what happened on that day, and that there was quite clearly on display from the very start and a genocidal intention. This genocidal intention was on display in various statements, including the famous one by Yoav Gallant, the minister of so-called defense of the Israeli state, who who announced that he was cutting all food, fuel, water, electricity, whatever it is, and everything that is controlled by Israel was cut from the Gaza Strip as a whole. That is, you are punishing a whole civilian population, a whole population, for deeds that have been made by a military organization, an armed organization. And the labeling of the enemy by this minister as human animals was very much part of this of the display of this genocidal intention. But beyond statements, and there were many statements, not only by this Minister of Defense, that was the most famous statement, but there were many, many statements revealing genocidal intention from Netanyahu to ministers to party leaders to all kinds of people in the Israeli political elite. Beyond that, the military goals that were stated on that day, I mean, as a reaction to that day, 7 October, from the very beginning, the military goals were themselves of a genocidal nature. That is, the military, the Israeli government decided to reoccupy the Gaza Bank, the Gaza Strip, sorry, decided to reoccupy the whole strip and proclaimed as its goal the eradication of Hamas, which, by the way, is a mass political organization, whereas 7 October was done by its military wing, which is called the Izz-ad-Din al-Qassam Brigades. So the fact that no distinction was made between the mass political organization that had been ruling the strip since 2007 and its military wing, and the goal to, the statement of a goal of eradication of this whole political or mass political organization meant very clearly that we were facing a genocidal intention. That is, the intention of killing without discrimination tens of thousands of people. That was very clear. And even more so in the fact that the Israeli army started destroying, flattening the Gaza Strip, which is one of the most densely populated spots on Earth. They started destroying it systematically with extremely heavy bombs, one-ton bombs, which were not even designed for use in urban concentrations. But here you had it. They have been profusely used, dropped on these urban settings there. And that means, again, this is by itself a genocidal intention. I mean, I would say, of course, with a difference in scale, but when you throw a nuclear bomb on Hiroshima, you have a genocidal intention. That's very clear because you know that you're going to kill a huge number of people, right? And without any distinction, fighter, non-fighter, and there's nothing. Actually, the overwhelming, if not all, the people you're going to kill are non-combatants, and so all these issues together meant very clearly that from the start, we were facing a genocidal intention and a genocidal war. I used that term 3 days into the whole thing on the 10th of October 2023. But more importantly, even you have a genocide scholar, I mean, a scholar specialized in Holocaust and genocide studies, who himself is Israeli, Ras Segal, and based in the United States where he teaches. He wrote a piece on the 13th of October, so before 1 week had elapsed, with the title "A Case." Sorry, what was it? Can't forget the exact term, but I mean, genocide was very much prominent in the title of his piece. A textbook case of genocide. Yeah, now I remember it. So just to tell you that it was clear for who wanted to see from the beginning that that we were facing a genocidal intention, and that what had started as a reaction to 7 October was a genocidal war. Well, now back to the question about what's the connection between 7 October and that. Well, 7 October definitely was the trigger, but only the trigger. I mean, there's no, no possibility to compare what happened on 7 October with what is happening, what has been happening for 2 years now. The level of destruction and killing goes far beyond any kind of understandable retaliation. I mean, the disproportion between 7 October and what has been happening since then is blatant. It's absolutely obvious. That means that 7 October basically was seized as an opportunity by the most right wing, the farthest to the right of all governments in Israel history, and I wouldn't hesitate to say the farthest to the right of all governments of our time, because there's no, I mean, in no country there is such a far right government, so extreme. Well, this government seized the opportunity of 7 October to launch this genocidal war. I mean, if you want an analogy, it's like 9/11 and the occupation of Afghanistan, and even more so the occupation of Iraq later on by the Bush administration, George W. Bush administration. Well, that was obviously not a response to 9/11, but that was an administration that had for long the goal of invading Iraq, occupying Iraq, which seized the opportunity of 9/11 to do it. So, in a sense, that's an analogy here that one can use to explain the relation between October 7 and what is going on, the genocidal war that is going on.
In your book, you give an excellent historical survey of what has transpired in the West Bank and in Gaza and with Israel, especially the PLO leadership, because a lot of people unfamiliar with this crisis that has been going on for several decades, almost 80 years now, do not understand the intricacies. You note in your book how Arafat, for instance, at one point was forced to renounce all forms of terrorism. Various American presidents came in and would have some kind of peace process, in air quotes, peace process. What is clear to anyone seeing this history, however, is that Israel is always the exception, always protected and funded by the US, motions against Israel in the UN vetoed by the US, and Hasbara abounds throughout legacy media. It's phenomenal to me, for instance, given what happened yesterday in London, the plethora of coverage by the BBC on this. Yet, yesterday morning, I awoke to seeing how was it the flotilla was intercepted? Now, you and I both know that if that interception had happened by Hamas or by the Houthis, it would have been called kidnapping, right? But the Israelis are free to take 400 plus activists and intercept them, not kidnap them. So the language of legacy media is already sterilized to protect Israel, just as the US protects Israel within the United Nations. Or as we saw last week, all those countries saying yes to Palestinian statehood, but this week, since yesterday, not a word about the en masse kidnapping of peace activists. It's phenomenal. You conclude in your first section of your book criticizing what you call a racial double standard, whereby Palestine was and still is the means to absolving Europe of its anti-Semitism while perfectly setting Europe's jewelry within the land of Palestinians. And then you go on and you write, I'm quoting, "The new anti-Semitism attributed en bloc to Muslims as well as to left-wing defenders of Muslim immigrants' rights and critics of Israel has thus come to serve as ideological cover to absolve the European and American far right of their past and present anti-Semitism in order to collude with them on the ground of Islamophobia, nowadays the main feature of their racism and xenophobia. In the name of countering this purported anti-Semitism, a racial double standard is applied, fostering indifference to Palestinian suffering and leading to partake in a new instance of genocide denial. Those Western liberals who have indulged in such cowardly behavior have further discredited their own ideological standing in the face of the global surge of the far right. Thus, they have been digging their own grave." To me, this says volumes. It's absolutely accurate. How do you see us getting out of this? Obviously, there's the problem of Israel and Palestinian statehood, Palestinian rights, the settlements. There's hundreds of problems to be solved. But it seems that to most people who study this field, the Middle East was used as a geographical relocation of Jews to out of sight, out of mind. Yes, there are Holocaust museums around the world, but the problem of that form of racism was never truly addressed culturally by many of the countries that took part in anti-Semitism. Instead, you have this mass relocation of European Jewry post-World War II, or those who didn't go to Mexico, Australia, all over the world in the immigration that, of course, happened as well. So when you speak of the whitening of European Jews in the following chapter, I'm very much with you in what you advance here and the way you talk about how old Christian prejudice gave way to pseudoscientific anti-Semitism. And this all has to do with the way that, let's say, the US government has colluded with Likud politicians and even further to the right politicians to ensure this kind of forever war, this forever conflict, right? And here you have Donald Trump ironically, being nominated, this beggars belief, being nominated by Netanyahu for a Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, I cracked up when I saw it. I couldn't help but laugh because it's beyond Monty Python-esque, right? It's like Goebbels saying to Adolf, I'm going to nominate, the whole thing's insane. So how do we in Western Europe, even North America, get out of this very mendacious cycle where even those of us on the left who want to vote out people who continue this process at the same time, Gilbert, I kept saying to people last year, even if Jill Stein were to win, I don't know if there aren't more forces keeping us obliged to protecting Israel that even the president can't get out of. There's a lot of transnational interest between Israel and the United States, business, big tech, and so forth.
Right. I mean, the United States commitment to Israel is not something that has existed from the start. It really began in the mid-60s. That is almost 20 years into the existence of the Israeli state, which was officially born in 1948. The reason for that, tells you a lot about the reason for this strategic alliance that started then. And that reason was the fact that the United States was losing ground in the Middle East in the face of rising and radicalizing Arab nationalism, embodied above all by then Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser. This radicalization, left-wing radicalization of Arab nationalism and its expansion in the region, in alliance with the Soviet Union also, all this made the United States turn towards Israel as a military ally, reliable in the protection of the key interests of the United States in that part of the world, which are represented by, the oil-rich states of the Gulf, essentially. This importance of the Gulf states has not diminished if you just look at how much Donald Trump how important these states are for him, to the point that on his two mandates, he dedicated his first visit abroad as president to visiting them, to going to the Saudi kingdom first. That tells you a lot about how much that means in terms of interest for the United States. And so Israel's role, as illustrated first in the so-called Six-Day War of 1967, when Israel dealt a heavy blow to the two most radical, in the sense of left-wing radicalism, regimes of the time, which were in Egypt and in Syria. That war cemented this alliance, and since then you had the strategic alliance of United States with Israel. If you look before, just if you take the previous war, 1956, the tripartite aggression of Britain, France, and Israel against Egypt following the nationalization by Egypt of the Suez Canal. Well, the United States condemned that war, stood against it, and voted for its ending, and even called on the three states to withdraw their troops from there. So you see the change in attitude, and the change in attitude is determined by what I try to explain. And that is why you have this commitment from the United States to Israel. I mean, if you take Donald Trump, He certainly, uh, in his own scale of esteem and it's obvious that the oil monarchies stand much higher than Israel. And you could see how he reacted after this attack by Israel on Qatar. I mean, this is unprecedented. Uh, he, he not only expressed his dissatisfaction, even though that was quite hypocritical, but he just recently issued a presidential executive order by which he is granting Qatar full U.S. protection, considering, I mean, any attack on Qatar to be equivalent to an attack on the United States. I mean, this is unprecedented. But that should, I mean, even with Israel, he didn't do that. None of them, none of the U.S. president did that, even after October 7th. So just to that shows you where the real interests lie and what is the value of the Israeli state in that regard. It's a major piece of the U.S. Military system in the region. And we could see that in the other wars that Israel launched in the wake of this war on Gaza, which where the war on Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is part of its war on Iran and the direct attacks on Iran, the last of which was joined directly by the United States under Donald Trump. Iran is a major threat to U.S. interests in the Gulf area and in the region as a whole. So here you see this huge and importance of the Israeli state as a state which has a huge military I mean, proportionally to what it is, its size, to the point that it is usually described by Israeli critics themselves as an army with a state, not a state with an army, when describing Israel. And it's a kind of aircraft carrier in the flank of the Middle East, and narrowly link it to the United States. This is also a military force that can intervene at any time upon U.S. request if needed, without needing to go through the whole political process that you have in the United States when engaging in a war. You have to go through the Senate and all this. So all this, I mean, makes Israel a very precious ally for the United States. For the other Western countries, I mean, there is, of course, the same dimension in the sense that all of them have interests in the Gulf and with the oil monarchies of the Gulf. But I mean, in addition to that, for many of them, there is a guilt complex that was born out of their participation in the genocide of European Jews by Nazism. And that has been a base for their almost unconditional support for Israel, which is most obviously the case, of course, with Germany as the main perpetrator of the genocide of the Jews. So this is also, I mean, of course, there are constituencies, there are lobbies and all that militate in favor of those ties between those countries and and Israel. In the United States, you have the Israel lobby is mostly a Christian lobby. I mean, there are those so-called Christian Zionists, the evangelists and others, who are the staunchest most unconditional supporters of Israel and even the Israeli far right, not only Israel.
Oh, Gilbert, not to interrupt you, but when I was working in Jerusalem, I worked on the first 5 female suicide bombers of the Second Intifada. And when I was at B'Tselem's office, they gave me a pamphlet on the lobby. One of the major lobbies is based out of Dallas-Fort Worth in Texas. And I read their pamphlet, and it's almost comic once again. The reason why that group supports Zionism is because of this. They believe that when Jesus comes back to earth, that they will be chosen before
Yes.
the Jews. This is Monty Python-esque again, you know?
Of course, no, the Jews will have either to convert or to go to hell. Yeah, it's basically an anti-Jewish perspective, that of those evangelists and the Christian Zionists. And they are Zionists. I mean, they actually basically you've had from the beginning, and that is very clearly stated in the manifesto of modern Zionism, of the statist Zionism, the book by the founding father of Zionism, Theodor Herzl, the book called The State of the Jews. That's the correct translation of the German title. And well, he states very clearly that the best allies of the Zionist project are the anti-Semites. I mean, there is a common interest. The anti-Semites want to get rid of the Jews. I mean, they want to evacuate them. They want to expel them out of their countries, and we, the Zionists, want to take them to Palestine, want to bring them out of other countries into our state of the Jews that we will be building in Palestine. So what you are pointing to is a perfect illustration of this close alliance between anti-Semites and Zionists.
It blows the mind because one thing that I've also dealt with since 7 October of 2023 has been dealing with the feminists who have been the biggest proponents of the Hasbara narrative about the beheaded babies, the alleged rapes. And what I find most interesting about what's happened over the past 2 years has not only been the tragic genocide effected by Israel and unfortunate terms like mowing the lawn. I mean, completely grotesque ways of referring to humans. But one thing that's really struck me has been the way that media has been completely complicit in this, probably more than any time in recent history. A few facts, I'm sure you know about this, but for our listeners, this has happened in the past month and over the summer. NPR revealed that last year, Israel had been buying Google ads to spread false information about United Nations Relief and Works Agency, also known as UNRWA. And upon complaints being filed in breach of Google's own rules, Google said, we good, it's fine. Because even if it's inaccurate, it doesn't break our rules. So they redid their rules to make it okay. Then this year, we've been treated to videos on Google-owned YouTube stating, I'm quoting from the video, there is food in Gaza, any other claim is a lie, published by Israel's foreign ministry to Google's YouTube station. And then much of the videos reach results from an ad placed during an ongoing and previously unreported 45 million advertising campaign initiated between Google and Netanyahu's offices in June. And the contract, which is held both with YouTube and Google's advertising campaign management platform, Display and Video 360, characterizes the ad campaign as Hasbara, a Hebrew word denoting somewhere between public relations and propaganda. And now, months after the U.S. has been in negotiation with the Chinese owners of TikTok, ByteDance, to purchase the U.S.-facing asset company, President Trump recently announced that mega billionaire Larry Ellison, along with Dell founder Michael Dell and others, have been involved in the purchase of TikTok. And then this in addition to the recent evidence this week given by Nick Cleveland Stout, who has the scoop on Israel paying influencers $7,000 per post on social media like TikTok and Instagram on behalf of Israel. So he's been able to show how they have started an influencer campaign with invoices that this journalist was able to find for a sum of $900,000 that began in June, slated to end in November. There's more. On top of all this, you saw the photo of all the hundreds of U.S. lawmakers that just went to Israel on the Israel tour, propaganda tour that many lawmakers go on. And that is not only breaching U.S. law, because a lot of this money, it's all non-U.S. money, so it has to be registered under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. That plus all these influencers that are not declaring the money coming directly from Israel. So you've got this crazy buyout of media, because what they figured out and have worried about, Gilbert, is that the younger generation aren't watching CNN, MSNBC. They couldn't be bothered. They're watching TikTok. Hence, let's buy that out. What the attacks this summer on Iran, Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, on top of what's happening in Gaza, have demonstrated that there's one rule for Israel, another rule for everyone else. And this has all been allowed because of the media control. Loads of people are watching CNN and they think, they must be terrorists. So this all started in September of 2023. They believe this because the media is propounding this over and over. And now that the right wing in the States is losing members who believe in the Israel project, even conservative Americans are now some of the biggest peaceniks out there. It's phenomenal to see Democrats saying nothing on the genocide in Gaza and Republicans speaking out, like Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is insane. I would never have thought this, Gilbert.
Yeah, well, it's a fringe of the Republicans and actually of the MAGA current, because what does it mean to be a Republican for such people? Today, the Republican Party is the MAGA party, basically.
Right, but the MAGA party is also split, because the ones ones who support Israel, but there's the part that says, hey, our tax money should be going to MAGA, to America first, not Israel first, right?
Yes, but this is a fringe, like people like Tucker Carlson or Marjorie Taylor Greene, whom you mentioned. It is surprising indeed, but it's, the overwhelming majority of the Republican Party and voters are very much pro-Israel. And in that regard, you have had a shift among the Democrats and those who vote for the Democrats, of whom a very clear majority today is very critical of Israel. And the very important change is also among American Jews, where the mood has shifted quite spectacularly with regard to Israel, especially among the young people. So you have this situation where in the United States, that's particular to the United States, but the staunchest Zionists are Christian. And it is in this political constituency represented by Christian Zionism or by evangelism and the rest that you have the staunchest supporters of Israel, whereas you will find a quite higher proportion of critics of Israel among Democrats and among American Jews. That is very, very important. Maybe the only little ray of hope that exists in what is happening today, the only silver lining, if you want, for the future.
You're listening to Savage Minds, and we hope you're enjoying the show. Please consider subscribing. We don't accept any money from corporate or commercial sponsors, and we depend upon listeners and readers just like you. Now, back to our show. True, although with the murder of Charlie Kirk the other week, It was also interesting to see the way that immediately on social media, a lot of Republicans, this is perhaps conspiracy theory or not, because we don't know anything still. There's been no facts issued by official sources, really, but many suspected Israel. And it was very interesting. I've been following the debates online because whether or not they're right is the accusation that means something. And one thing that we see in the surveys is that the younger Republicans are very much turning on Israel, which worries the older Republicans. There was a leaked conversation recently by two members of Knesset who were discussing, in fact, this very turn. So people are now worried in Israel and in the AIPAC sector, let's say, they're very worried that they might lose the social media war, which for people under the age of 30 is everything. So I find it quite interesting that 2 years ago, the majority of Republicans had a very favorable opinion of Netanyahu, but that is quickly going down. I don't know to what degree. It won't likely match that of Democrats. One thing that your book shows in terms of the catastrophe at the heart of Gaza, it's not just the IDF or the historic state of Israel, of course, that plays a huge role, but Hasbara is very much part and parcel of why we're having this debate almost 80 years later. Aside from the genocide in Gaza, and there are many people who believe that the genocide predated 7 October, how much control over this narrative through media is this debate really about? What I see looking at this from a bird's eye view is that a lot of what's been going on the past 2 years has been about narrative control, where bizarrely, minutes after Charlie Kirk was murdered, we have Benjamin Netanyahu coming on social media, making comments, and within a day was saying, I didn't kill him, twice. He went on to say he didn't have anything to do with this person's murder. So there's a fear you can already see, real or not, in terms of the Israeli or the Zionist project is about how people perceive us, how people will embrace what we're saying. And then the recent influx of money, the hundreds of millions being put towards the narrative, I'd say that Hasbara has a lot more to do with this today than any other project we have within the problems of major media, the recent buyout. Oh my gosh, they're naming Barry Weiss as head of NBC. She's 41 years old. I've never heard of anyone being head of any major station who isn't in at least their 60s. I mean, this is pretty wild what's happening with the buyout of the media.
Yeah, I mean, what's happening in the United States is mind-boggling. It's beyond imagination, beyond political fiction. The latest ceremony bringing all those military high brass from all over the world to listen to the two of the silliest speeches in history by Trump and his Secretary of War, not Defense, and they insist on replacing defense by war, which actually is the only real instance of true speak for
Yes,
them.
yes.
They should suggest to Israel to do the same, because
Yeah,
IDF also is a complete misnomer. It's not
right.
these forces are not Israeli defense forces. They are Israeli war forces, if not aggression forces, actually, or occupation forces most of the time. And but overall, in the battle for public opinion, it's obviously clear that Israel has been losing it. Whereas in the immediate aftermath of October 7, there was a huge lot of identification with Israel and sympathy for Israel. And um, the functioning of what I called narcissistic compassion, that is, for Western countries, a specific compassion with the likes and the likes in this regard are the Israelis, especially if you take the rave party and all that. Everything was made was there to increase this Western identification with the Israelis. So that's what I call this narcissistic compassion. So there was a huge lot of compassion after October 7th. But this war, this genocidal war waged by this ultra-right government has been going on for so long, has been so devastating, has been so crude and cruel, and for in the last months that also impacted a lot the very obviously orchestrated starvation of the population there. All these images that percolated but ended up being seen by everyone of children, of women, I mean, all this suffering that you have, terrible suffering in Gaza, to the point that if you remember, Trump at one point said that Melania was not happy with what she was seeing. So that was, I mean, it needed his wife to tell him that this is awful, right?
Right.
This has led to a huge deterioration of the image of the Israeli state. This is a long process, actually. It starts a long time ago. It starts with the invasion of Lebanon in 1982, which is the first war of Israel that was unpopular in the West. I mean, because even in Israel, you had a huge split of the Israeli society on the rationale of invading Lebanon. That was very clearly, as you know, the formula goes, a war of choice, not a war of defense. Couldn't be presented as a war of defense. That was very clearly a war of choice, and that was the reason why it wasn't popular. Then that was in 1982, and then you had the Intifada in 1987, which was a popular non-violent uprising in the Palestinian occupied territories of 1967, and that was brutally repressed by the Israelis. And so you had deterioration of the image. But then with the return to violent clashes, military actions in after 2000, and the suicide attacks and others, you had a kind of dialectics between the Israeli violence and well, very feeble counter violence from the Palestinian side, mostly by Hamas. And that could alter again the perception. But then you came with this, with the onslaughts on Gaza, the 2008-9 one, the 2014 one, again stirred consciences abroad and in the West. And then you come to this genocidal war, which, as I said, cancels the effect of 7 October, which was the first effect of very much identification with the Israelis. So today, Israel is really at the lowest point in the history of its image in the West, in Western countries, and at every stage of this deterioration of image, the Israeli state, the Zionist movement, have resorted to the instrumentalization of the Holocaust and of the accusation of antisemitism in order to deflect the criticisms that they were hearing. And none has done that more than Netanyahu himself, you know. And here he is now. Most recently, he accused the governments of France, Britain, and the rest of allowing anti-Semitism because they recognized this so-called state of Palestine. And his reaction to the recent anti-Semitic attack in Manchester has been to blame the British government for having been soft on terrorism. I mean, as an explanation for this surge in some scattered anti-Semitic attacks or acts, that is a way of ignoring the obvious, which is the fact that if there is any rise in such attacks, it is very closely linked to the ongoing genocidal war, which made some people who are politically illiterate and unable to make the distinction between Zionism and Judaism attack Jewish targets, but very much in their minds as a kind of revenge taken for the Gazans, which is of course very stupid.
But the British government has fallen into the trap. Look at the news this morning with Shabana Mahmoud, who told the media this morning that the protests for Gaza in the wake of the Manchester attack are un-British. She herself makes the leap, the connection between protests for human rights against a genocide in Gaza as being linked somehow to the attack yesterday in Manchester. And I agree with you that everyone has been saying this, including American Jews. They say the state of Israel is making anti-Semitism more a possibility, more a reality,
Yes.
the more they behave like this. And so the British government itself is making these very basic mistakes in educating the public and saying, while that is a travesty, we cannot forget that there is a genocide going on in the Middle East, that we are arming and sending airplanes. We are supporting. No, let's prescribe Palestine action. We have one of our writers, a colleague of yours from London, who is facing terrorism charges because she stood with Palestine Action. She was one of the first 19 arrested with a sign against genocide. So here we are arresting people with peace signs. And then you saw the photos last week with the British government officials hobnobbing with al-Jilani, right? So they can have lunch and dine with the ISIS leader who until January of this year was on wanted lists in the United States government, right? There was a $10 million bounty on his head until mid-January, the current president of Syria. So, yeah, there's just enormously funny in a way, no?
Yeah, yeah. He wasn't linked to ISIS. He was linked to Al Qaeda originally, and then they split from Al Qaeda. But yes, of course, he was regarded as a terrorist until very recently, until he seized power in Damascus. Yeah. But yeah, of course, if you want to point to the contradictions and absurdities in the conduct of foreign policy of Britain or the United States or any of these states, I mean, all of them have double standards, and that's a starting point. There are not even double, multiple standards, one should say, and that became more obvious than ever with the contemporary character of the two wars of Ukraine and Gaza, and the huge difference in the Western attitude towards what's happening in Ukraine and towards what is happening in Gaza, the huge difference between Western attitudes toward the action of international judicial organization like the International Criminal Court in the case of Israel and in the case of Ukraine, that is, in the case of Israel, in the case of Russia, the huge difference in attitude and all that have shown beyond any possible doubt how much these rules, which are supposed to be the basis of international relations, have no value, not only in the eyes of Russia as portrayed or emphasized by Western governments, but in their eyes themselves, very clearly so, as they demonstrated. So yes, I mean this is obvious, and also, I mean, of course, the what you are pointing to when it comes to Palestine action here, I mean, we see also how ridiculous it is to label as terrorist an organization that well was only committed to direct action but never killed or harmed anyone, called that terrorism, while dropping this label from an organization that was involved in major killings in Syria. And you just mentioned how they treat now this new Syrian president. So yes, of course, all this is part of this huge double standard, which has discredited completely the liberalism, because this is above all a double standard manifested by liberals. Because in a sense, far right people like the MAGA folks, for instance, don't give a damn about rules. You know, they don't claim to follow any rules. They say America first. We don't give a damn about what the rest of the world wants. You know, we will do what we believe is in our interest. And we want, I mean, the United Nations want that. I mean, they have full contempt for all this. So the liberals, their claims of abiding by some rules-based order have been completely discredited. And this discredit itself has been one of the ingredients, the ideological ingredients upon which the far right has been growing. I mean, you have had now decades of far right development in the world, in Europe, or in the Western countries, Europe and the United States, in particular, and it has accelerated a lot in the last 15 years or so. But the background of that is that this collapse of liberalism, of Western liberalism, of Atlanticist liberalism, and one part of this collapse is the fact that those so-called liberals are adapting massively to the far right. Just look at the British government you're mentioning on the issue of immigration. I mean, they have laid the ground for the spectacular rise in the far right in this country, unprecedented. You've never seen in the history of Britain such demonstrations as the one that happened some days ago in London, which was the largest far right demonstrations in British history. And this rise of Farage, his party now being almost 1/3 in the polls of the voters, far ahead of both the Labour and the Conservative. All this, I mean, the Labour, the liberals that are heading the Labour Party, Keir Starmer and company, they bear a key responsibility in this rise in their own behavior. So, and that's you could say exactly the same about Joe Biden.
Yes, absolutely.
And how much this paved the way for the second coming, if one could say, of Donald Trump, right?
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
this formula is very fit for Donald Trump, the second coming. He I mean, even Kamala Harris, in her newly released memoirs or book about her campaign, she acknowledges
Yeah.
the fact that his inability to show any empathy for the Gazans played an important role in her defeat. In
Right.
the fact that the Democrats lost a lot of potential votes, and so you see how those
But look at the squad. The squad in the States that pretends to be lefty, right? Ocasio Cortez, Bernie Sanders, they can't even get around saying starvation, much less genocide.
no, Bernie Sanders said it.
Oh, he
Yeah, but
finally did. Okay, because
yes,
that
yes,
took him
yes,
a
he was.
while. I mean, we
Yeah,
were like biting our nails waiting.
yeah.
But a lot of the left has been not just under Biden, even, the Obama administration. Some of the policies that were enacted have not helped the cause of Palestinian rights, much less the understanding of. Let's talk about your chapter on Hamas here, because you talk about the electoral victory of Hamas. And one thing I'm sure you've seen all over social media or from even legacy media pundits, they say, as have many of these people saying, we accept the state of Palestine, but Hamas must disband, Hamas must disarm. And isn't it interesting? The first country that brought charges to Israel, South Africa, they were not required to disband the ANC, not before Nelson Mandela was released from prison, not after. And that was the major political force in the country. And they committed violence. What do you see as the paradoxical situation here with Hamas and obviously the now defanged PLO, because it's become this kind of hollowed out organization that even Palestinians have many issues with? Could you discuss that? Because a lot of people don't really understand the history of Hamas and why even the consequences of almost 80 years of occupation.
Yeah, I mean, of course, Hamas is a product of this history that you are pointing to. It's first of all, a reaction indeed to all those years of oppression of the Palestinians. It's also a product of the failure of the PLO in continuing to embody the resistance to Zionism, and that became very clear after the Oslo Agreement, which the PLO concluded with the Israeli government, and which basically led the PLO to enter into a game in which it became a proxy government for the Israeli occupation in Palestinian inhabited areas of the West Bank and in Gaza, and that's the background upon which Hamas could grow. I mean, originally Hamas was the armed wing of the Muslim Brotherhood's Palestinian branch, and it was founded in late 87, at the time of the beginning of the First Intifada, this major uprising. That organization, which was not involved into any armed activities until then, and which was even favored by the Israeli occupation as an antidote to the PLO, suddenly founded a military wing, seeing the radicalization of the population, which went into uprising. They thought that the time has come for them to take that role, and they shifted from outflanking the PLO to the right into, I mean, not to the right, to accommodation with Zionism, into outflanking the PLO into rejection of Zionism, and that's how they grew later on. And well, yes, I mean, this you have this history, and then you have at some point Hamas decided to stop its own armed actions, violent actions, and to enter the electoral arena. And they took part in the elections, the Palestinian elections of the last one until now of 2006. And won that election because I mean, as an expression of people's rejection of the ongoing conditions of that existed, the failure of Oslo, of this Palestinian Authority that was very corrupt. All this played a key role. But then again, you had you have this organization which decides to become political and stop violent actions, and then what happens is Western governments say we don't recognize the result of these elections, and we encourage Mahmoud Abbas, that is the Palestinian Authority based in the West Bank in Ramallah, to overthrow them, basically, and that led to the split between the West Bank, taken over by the PA, the Palestinian Authority, and Gaza, where Hamas was the strongest, taken over by them. And since 2007, they have been ruling the Strip since then. Well, Netanyahu came back to power in 2009. He has basically remained almost all the time, except for a few months in 21, 22. He has remained at the helm, the head of the Israeli government, and it was clear that he favored the continuation of the division of the Palestinians between West Bank and Gaza, and the continuation of Hamas rule in Gaza. So he actually allowed Hamas rule to continue in Gaza by allowing its funding by Qatar in particular. This has been he has been criticized in Israel. He is still very much criticized for that. Of course, those who criticize him would have wanted him to strangulate the Strip. The issue is not here, but the issue is that, I mean, this would have been the natural position for a Zionist government in the face of Hamas. But the fact that he allowed and even, gave them a green light for a number of things showed that he was happy with them continuing to rule the Strip because they are his preferred enemy. Why is Hamas the preferred enemy of Netanyahu? Well, it's for a simple reason. It's that whereas the Palestinian Authority is regarded as a legitimate interlocutor by the Western governments, Hamas is not. It's labeled as terrorist. And that's great for Netanyahu because that, as he explained himself before October 7 to a convention of his own party, the Likud, he boasted about letting Hamas run the Strip because he said that's how I prevented any talk about the Palestinian state, and that canceled the possibility of talking about that. So yes, I mean, all this, you have a lot of cynicism, Machiavellism, as it's called sometimes, but that's what has been happening until, of course, this October 7, which he did not expect, which went beyond, of course, whatever he had expected, and which was then seized, as we said at the beginning, as an opportunity by the far right of his own constituency, of those ultra right groups with whom he had formed his latest government, to push for the genocide, for the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, the reoccupation and ethnic cleansing that has been the goal that they were pursuing from the beginning.
A lot of our listeners are aware of the decolonization of countries like much of West Africa, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, etc. And a lot of people don't understand how the situation that I grew up in. I grew up as a kid. I remember the Menachem Begin and Sadat talks and Jimmy Carter. Why has this been allowed to persist for so long? And what do you see the outcome to be?
Well, as you know, I mean, the Trump plan has been announced just a few days ago, last Monday, and this plan is now, I mean, the ball is in the court, in Hamas's court. I don't know if there is something to now, as we are speaking in the news, but Hamas, before we speak, hadn't proclaimed its position about that. I think it will be very difficult for them to accept it, because basically this plan, as many have said, fulfills Israel's conditions on the issue. I mean, some people have said, there is a statement by Israel that it doesn't want to occupy the strip or empty it from its population. But Netanyahu had stated this several days before all this. So there's nothing new. No, the key point is that Hamas must surrender completely and basically leave Gaza if they want to survive it. You have an international tutelage which will be imposed, a kind of colonial mandate imposed on the territory with an administration, with an authority, I mean, presided by Donald Trump. I mean, you can't invent that. That is so grotesque. This is absolutely ridiculous. The Gazans are making, I mean, with all the suffering they have, they are making jokes about that, saying, "Oh, our new president is Donald Trump." I mean, and who else? And Tony Blair, of course, Tony Blair, the great expert in failed political operations. So they say that if all goes well according to the plan, it may be possible in the future to address the self-determination of the Palestinians and the possibility of a state.